Welcome to Techstination. I'm Fred Fishkin at the Out of Oregon Landscape Photography Conference taking place in Newport, Oregon. And with me is Nick Page, one of the instructors here. Thank you so much for joining us, Nick.
No problem at all. It's cool to get to sit down and talk with a fellow radio person. It's pretty cool.
Tell me about this conference and what you've been doing here. You've been taking people out, myself included, to make or take images, depending on how you want to phrase it, all around the coast here.
Yeah, so I'm based out of Eastern Washington, and one of the things that I get
Walla Walla, we like to say that word.
Exactly. Walla Walla, Washington. You might remember it from Bugs Bunny. But one of the things that I get to do, because I'm a spoiled Pacific Northwest kid, is that I get to travel over to the coast to do a lot of landscape photography. And so this conference, which is put on by the Out of Chicago guys, this is based out of Newport, Oregon, and I'm kind of one of the local hired guns that they've brought in to not only put on a conference where we're doing presentations and a lot of classroom teaching, but every morning, every evening we're going out, we're doing excursions, we're teaching in the field, and it's really, really cool for me that gets to shoot this place all the time to see some of the East Coast people experience this beautiful coast and take them out, get their feet wet, out literally, and it's a little bit of a guilty pleasure for me to watch people getting soaked and experiencing the coast for the first time. So it's a ton of fun.
And they're going out rain or shine.
Yep, absolutely. So part of the Pacific Northwest is shooting in the rain. So we're all getting familiar with our rain gear and kind of working with the challenges that the weather can give us sometimes.
And we're talking to some of the photographers about their journey to becoming a professional photographer. And I think your story is one of the more interesting ones to tell and inspirational at the same time, because you haven't been a pro for all that long.
No, so I've been a full-time photographer, quote unquote, a pro for 5 years, but I've only been doing photography at all for 6 years. So I quickly...
In 1 year, you decided, after you picked up a camera, I'm going to turn pro.
Yeah, I'm one of those really, really obsessive type persons that, like, when I get into something, I completely immerse myself in it. And so, when I first discovered, hey, I really like photography, I was, into my 30s, and I actually had this back injury that gave me a lot of time to learn stuff, and I used that time to, absorb the technical side of photography. And then I got my first camera, started doing photography, and within a year of picking up my first camera, I was shooting enough portraiture and weddings and that type of photography on the weekends that I was actually making more on my weekend than I was during my week at my day job that I didn't love. So that's kind of...
What were you doing? Share with us.
Yeah, so I was a golf course greenskeeper. And, very applicable to photography. And while I mowed, I was listening to podcasts and audiobooks, and that's kind of where my interest with podcasting and all of that comes from, because I was a heavy consumer of that stuff. But I was doing that job and doing photography on the weekends. At that time, I was very much a generalist photographer, just doing whatever people would pay me to do, trying to pay my bills. And when I realized that it was time to go full time, it was when I knew that I could make ends meet comfortably without risk. And that was actually, when I finally quit my day job and started doing photography full time, that's really when my career started to blossom, because I allowed myself the time to grow. When you only have a certain number of hours to dedicate towards this thing that you love, you can only get better at a certain rate. And then once I allowed myself more time to work towards my goals, it was amazing how fast I could accomplish them, because not only was I passionate about it, and not only did I love photography, but I treated it like a job. I worked hard at it. I probably worked 60-hour weeks, and I was either doing photography or delivering photography, or I put a lot of time into just the educational side of things and learning and working at getting better. And I think that that was probably one of the things that aided in my really quick rise to stardom, if you call it that. My quick rise to being where I am is that, I gave up a lot of the social life and a lot of the the stuff that we all waste time on. So many people watch Monday Night Football and watch sit down and binge watch a season of Game of Thrones. But my idea of a good time was to buy a tutorial and tuck my son into bed and get better at photography. And that was just how I spent my time. And for that reason, I got better at a pretty quick rate. Yeah.
You could have gone in any direction, it seems to me. What made you buy a camera, that first camera?
Well, so I had a background being a musician, and one of the things that I struggled with as I got older and I had a son is that, the musician life, not only were you subject to the personalities and the lifestyles of everybody else in the band, but the band was only ever going to be as good as the weakest member or the laziest member. You're only going to be as good as that lazy bass player. And what I loved about photography was the fact that it was all up to me. And I didn't have to be tall. I didn't have to be smart or fast or in shape. I didn't have to be any of those things to be good at photography. All I had to be is dedicated. And for that reason, that's kind of, the only thing holding a person back from being a good photographer is the amount of time and effort they pour into it. Because so much of the information is out there for free. You can literally educate yourself on becoming a professional photographer for free on YouTube. And you can't say that about too many professions, it used to be that you'd have to go to college for a number of years to become a professional at anything, but that's not true anymore with photography. All of that information is out there, and really the only thing holding a person back is the amount of time that they pour into it.
Don't you think there's something more? I mean, you can learn all the technical stuff. You can read it, you can watch those videos and learn all of that. But there's something deeper to really becoming a really great professional photographer. Or maybe you're not a professional, but to take the kinds of images that you've shown us here.
A lot of people would agree with you. I don't. I think that photography is one of those things that you can always work on your weaknesses. So I always say that there's a couple types of photographers. There's the photographers that are very technically minded. They pick up on the technical side of photography really quick. They love the technology, but they struggle with the creative aspect. They struggle with composition.
A lot of them are here to learn the creative aspect.
And so there's that personality type. Then there's the other personality type that is really great with the creative side of things. They're out rolling around on the ground, getting all these crazy angles and stuff, but they struggle to learn the technical side because it doesn't interest them. They often don't like the post-processing side of things. And there's kind of those two types, and everybody falls in the spectrum of that. And the thing about photography is you can always work on those weaknesses. And I don't think that there's any innate anything that makes one photographer better than another. The only difference is the amount of time and effort they pour into it. I'm one of those people that believes in the 10,000 hour rule, where there's a book called the talent code or the talent myth. And it's this idea that in order to become truly great at something, you just have to pour in the 10,000 hours of dedicated practice and make sure that you're using your time in a good way. Talks about lots of child prodigies, people that we see as these child prodigies, like the Tiger Woodses that were 3 years old and hitting golf balls. Thing is, by the time Tiger Woods was 3 years old, he'd already hit more golf balls than a lot of 20-year-olds. And it's just that they had put in that time. And the nice thing about photography is it's not like a sport where you have to be tall to be a good basketball player or to be flexible to be a good golfer. You just need to put in the time because there's none of those kind of barriers for entry with a creative thing like this.
Wow, that's really an interesting take on things. Some people would say it's not just 10,000 hours, it takes $10,000. What are your thoughts about the money aspect? Does somebody have to go out and spend $3, $5, $10,000 on the equipment to really be good?
The truth is no, but we all convince ourselves that we do, because photography is one of those things where it's a very expensive hobby. And some of us, we get gear acquisition syndrome where we just are obsessed with that newest thing. But the reality is, for the most part, you don't need that super expensive gear. You need adequate gear. But there comes a point where the gear, in some cases, will enable you to do a different type of photography, or might open some doors technically. But the only people that are going to really notice the difference are going to be other photographers. And people that are making a great living selling prints and stuff, they're often not hung up with that idea of having to have the latest and the greatest, because they understand that the people buying prints and the people purchasing art, they don't care about those little things. They care about, the other stuff, like it's pretty, composition, color, they're focused on those larger things rather than the absolute sharpness in that particular rock. That's the kind of thing that photographers get hung up on, not so much the people that are purchasing photography.
And you can spend $10 on a polarizer or $150 on a polarizer.
Yeah, exactly. But, it's kind of nice to have good stuff. So like, you can get from A to B in a 1978 Honda Civic, but you could also get there in a BMW, and it's a whole lot more comfortable. Like sometimes gear makes the shooting process more fun, and sometimes the more fun you're having, the more creatively inspired you are. So there's this funny thing where, like, if you're fighting your gear, you're not going to be as creative. So you could argue that enjoying your gear makes you more creative, but that's assuming you're actually enjoying the gear and using the gear. So for me, when I purchase gear, I make sure that I can justify the purchase by the fact that I'm actually going to use it enough to get my money's worth out of it.
What are your favorite things to tell people who just want to take better pictures?
That's a loaded one. I think that, compositionally, when a person goes to a place, when they go to a particular scene, I tell them that the whole photo taking process is a lot about trying to determine what it is that they love about the scene. Like, if you go to this particular scene and you're going to and you go to this particular scene and you're going to go home and tell your wife or your girlfriend the story about this place, what stuff would make it into that particular story? Would it be, the beautiful sunset? Probably. Would it be the flowing water? Most definitely. Would it be the cool rocks? Probably. Would it be the little sticks in the corner of your vision? Probably not. So trying to boil it down to the things that would make it into the story, and leave out all those things that you wouldn't bother to tell because it's not interesting. And just because a lot of people, they struggle with, like, you go to a beautiful place and they're overwhelmed, like, where do I point my camera? Like, where do I start with this composition? And that's kind of a way of boiling it down, is to just figure out what is the most important parts to you as the person experiencing it to include into that shot. What parts of it do you want to include into that story?
A lot of us get to a scene, like so many of the places here, and you just keep clicking and clicking and clicking. Yep. Is that a bad thing or a good thing? I mean, you find, hey, another wave, another rock.
I think that the most important part of that is totally fine to take. A lot of times when I'm photographing surf and waves, I'm taking tons of photos, thousands of photos. But the most important thing is that you're taking them with a purpose. Like, you've taken the time to really dial in whatever composition you're going towards. You're just trying to find that right moment, that right wave. Because when you're photographing waves and surf, every single wave is going to be different. And for that reason, and you don't really know what it's going to do until it does it. And then you're like, oh, no, didn't get it at that, but at least I took that shot. But You need to make sure that you're doing all of that after you've done your homework, as far as like making sure your settings are proper, making sure that your composition is clean, those kinds of things. Once you get that, then you kind of got the green light to just like, take a bunch of shots.
I think our mutual friend Rick Salmon calls it OCD, obsessive clicking disorder.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I mean, it's just part of the digital age, I think, is that, SD cards and memory is cheap, and the trying to capture that decisive moment, sometimes you don't know that it's happened until it's already happened. So you want to be present when and anticipate it when it's could happen.
Well, thank you so much for all the work that you're doing here and for everything you're doing with photography. We're all learning a lot from you. Where can people find your work, your podcast, etc.?
So the easiest way is just Google Nick Page, but the name of my podcast is the Landscape Photography Podcast. No idea where I got the name for that. Just a blazing moment of inspiration. And then you can find me on YouTube. A lot of people kind of learn about me through YouTube. I kind of have behind-the-scenes videos of a lot of my adventures and tutorials and that stuff. You just do a search for Nick Page, you'll find me there. And my website is nickpagephotography.com.
Nick, thanks so much for taking the time with us.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you.
Cooking with the power of the sun. Hi, I'm Fred Fishkin, here to tell you about the latest innovation from my friend Patrick Sherwin and his great team at GoSun Stove. The GoSun Fusion has arrived using the company's tried and true reflectors and a solar vacuum tube to get you cooking without the mess of charcoal, heavy propane tanks, or smoke. A really bright idea. And with an optional solar panel and battery storage and the ability to plug in at home or on the road, you really can use the GoSun Fusion to cook anytime and anywhere, day or night, rain or shine. I love what Patrick and his team are doing, and so will you. Want to learn more? Head to gosun.co to check out all of the company's products and innovations, and use the code Techstination to save 10%. That's gosun.co.